whilst he knows very well that he's been nominated, hence the name, he's the nominee of one large shareholder. Potentially quite a difficult position to be in practice. An alternate director. Alternate director appears in some articles of association, allowing the board to appoint one or more people as a backup to a named director. Why should boards appoint people as alternates? It happens quite a lot in international companies which meet perhaps monthly, and it would be too expensive and too demanding for directors who serve in other parts of the world to be coming to the head office, to the main boardroom 10 or 12 times a year. Maybe they come 2 or 3 times. For the rest, the alternate director acts. The phrase governing director appears in Australian company law and is used to describe the director in those typically small, but not as necessarily so, companies in which the director and the shareholder are the same. A governing director, as the name indicates, is a director who is in a position of governing the company. Worker director, employee director, if you remember our first discussion together, appeared first in the 1970s. European Union wanted to introduce 2-tier boards with, on the supervisory board, employee representatives. British objected, and the Lord Bullock's committee, you remember I mentioned, proposed employee directors on the unitary board. One doesn't hear very much discussion of worker or employee directors these days, although we shall mention it again in a few moments when we focus on 2-tier supervisory boards, both in the German context and, very interestingly, in the mainland China context. Which brings me to the final, but quite important, use of the word director, an associate director. Actually, a phrase used to describe a person who is not on the board at all. There's actually no reason why anybody, with the company's approval, could be named as a director. And you find it quite often in companies that they give people the title of director. The marketing director, the advertising director, the director of personnel, who are in senior management, but are not actually members of the board. They've not been appointed to the board, their name doesn't appear in the annual accounts, their name does not appear in the company's registry. They're not actually directors of the company. But there's nothing to stop a company, if it so wishes, giving somebody the title director. Why do they do that? Well, sometimes it's a mark of recognition, it's a reward, it's a status position. On other occasions, the phrase is used because the person in that position, if he holds the title director, is held in esteem perhaps by customers, by the clients of that particular company. So be careful. People with the title director are not always actually serving on the board. Where that is the case, they'll be referred to as associate directors. Which brings me, in passing, to another connected phrase, that of cross-directorships. In the diagram we have here, there are 2 people, each serving on the boards of 3 companies, as you can see. The individuals are the boxes joined by the straight lines. As you can imagine, where you get a series of cross-directorships, with people serving on each other's boards, it begins to build up a network of contacts. This can be particularly relevant in the Hong Kong context, where amongst Hong Kong's listed companies, they are required under the Hong Kong listing rules to have a minimum of 3 independent non-executive directors. It's sometimes a little difficult to find a wide range of people, and there are some who get appointed to a number of boards. If one then begins to plot that interconnectedness of directors between a range of companies, all listed on the Hong Kong board, one begins to get a picture of an interplay, a network of potential power. The beneficial aspects of that is that these people know each other, trust each other, and the connections can be valuable. The counter-argument is, as one often hears, is that this fails to give complete independence and has the potential long-term for abuse. Cross-directorships. Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, I said I would mention briefly, but as far as the codes of good practice in corporate governance are concerned, they're quite clear. The roles should be separate. That's the role of the chairman and the role of the chief executive. Chief executive at the head of the management pyramid and the chairman running the board. In passing, I should mention that although a lot of people refer to the company chairman, the right title is chairman of the board. The shareholders don't actually appoint a person as chairman. The shareholders nominate formally and certainly vote for, often by proxy vote, the directors, and then subject to the articles, the directors meeting together appoint one of their number as chairman. But the codes are quite clear. The roles should be separated. Why? Because that provides good checks and balances. The relationship between the chairman of the board and the chief executive officer is clearly a very subtle and sensitive one. As Sir Adrian Cadbury writes in his very good book on company chairmanship, when it works well, this separation can work quite brilliantly. The reverse, unfortunately, can also be true. So the codes say the roles should be separated. I have to say that in the United States, however, the roles are almost always combined. The chairman is also the chief executive officer. The argument there is that you can't have two people running a company. You need to have single-minded leadership. Somebody who says to the rest of the board, this is the way we're going, I'm leading, and the others agreeing or agreeing to disagree, but coming to a consensus under the leadership of one person. Arguments for separation, arguments against, I've advanced them both. In the United States, there is a growing pressure, not very large at the moment, a growing pressure for the roles to be separated to reflect what happens in most of the rest of the world. Not surprisingly, that pressure is being resisted by many of the people holding the combined role of chairman and chief executive officer, because it would imply, a separation would imply a loss of a degree of their power. So chairman and chief executive officer to be separated, held by two different people in most of the codes, in fact all of the codes in most of the world, but the roles still combined in the United States.